Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and a guest this evening are Paul Guanci, almost ex-city councilor at large, and Tim Flaherty, another almost ex-city councilor at large. So the two of you decided that you've had enough and you're going to move on, right?
Yeah, I think so. Tim, why don't you go first?
Yeah, the timing is right. Just took over the Greater Beverly Y position, and it's just the right time to do that, and looking forward to a little retirement.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. My business has gotten really busy. It's been very challenging to run since COVID, and it got to the point with me is that I didn't have the time to get back to my constituents, either by phone call, email, follow through with requests and things like that, and that's really frustrating. For a city councilor that can't do that, it's unfair to be in office. So I decided really early on that this was going to be it, and it was a good time, good timing.
So basically, you said you had enough fun for the last 20 years or so, and decided.
Most of it has been fun. It's really been
What was the most fun?
I'll tell you what my most enjoyable moment was we gave a gentleman, Mr. Butler, he was 106 years old. He never graduated from high school. He worked, he went off to World War II, then he came back and he raised his family. I think he had 6 kids, and I was friendly with his daughter-in-law, and his grandson actually worked for me. So we put it all together that we would present him with his high school diploma, because he had said in an interview when he was 100 that was his biggest regret, that he hadn't finished school. So we worked with Sean Gallagher, who was the superintendent at the time, and we put together a ceremony at the high school and presented him with his diploma. He worked for the city for years, and at that time he was 106, and I think he made it till he was 107.
Wow.
That was the most special time. But there's a lot of little things along the way that make it well worthwhile.
What was your most fun?
I think the best part about being a city councilor is the people. Sometimes there's challenges every day when you're trying to help people make city government work for the citizens. But I think the people you meet along the way, the people who help us in our campaigns that you never knew, that became good friends, the family that you put them through the tough times going through that. I know my family is not a really lover of politics and being able to holding signs at 6 a.m. But I think it's the people that you met along the way that you didn't know, and you were able to help out people on a bigger level. I guess building a brand new high school and a new police station are some of the things that were something that we could really be proud of.
Well, you were both essentially in the same 20-year time block, and you just took 2 terms off.
Yep.
So in that 20 years, what do you think the most important thing that's happened to the city?
Probably financial stability for the city. From when Bill Scanlon took office till now, I think the city's bond rating has gone up and has been strong. So I think the city is in a better situation. We wouldn't be able to build a new police station, to build the schools. So I think financially, the city's in a much better situation than it was 20 years ago.
How'd you do it?
I think fiscal responsibility, trying to pay attention to the tax dollar for the citizens, but also trying to be creative in a situation where working with the city government, which I think is a great where Paul's leadership too as council president, and working with the mayor's office, where other cities and towns don't always have that relationship with the mayor's office. So I think working collectively, we were able to do it together to make a better city.
Just to follow up on that, I agree 100%. It's all about working together with the executive branch. And when Bill Scanlon took over in 1994, I think 1995 was his first year, the city was in debt, and he had a city council that he could work with, and they fostered that relationship that when Tim took over as president in 2000 existed, and I did that in 2002 when I happened to be president, and Nelson Benton, who used to be the editorial page director at the Salem News, who we always loved him when he was saying something good about us, but when he tried to throw one at you, we're like, oh.
Yeah.
So he said that, Beverly, he said long ago, Beverly was well served by the fact that your city council and your mayor's office work well together and not like surrounding towns. Salem has always been banging heads, same thing in Peabody. So we work really well together, and we've been able to do all these projects, 6 elementary schools, a middle school, a high school, and then the police department without a debt exclusion override.
Yeah.
And I think the good thing is too is we were very fortunate to have a lot of good city councilors to work with, and that's not always the case in other cities and towns. I remember Ginny McGlynn and Russ Rollins, back in the day, and to Johnny Frady's, Judith Cronin. I mean, there were a lot of good people. Kevin Hoban.
Yeah, Kevin Hoban was the best.
That makes life a lot easier when you have good people working around you. It makes life as council presidents trying to help move the city forward.
What makes Kevin Hoban the best?
Because Kevin took his job serious. He did it for eight years, 4 terms, and he always knew when things were getting a little tense at City Hall, he always knew how to step back and make it a little lighter for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether it was Mayor Scanlon at the podium going toe-to-toe with a resident, Mary Roderick or Renee Mary or Pam Campersall. I mean, that made for good TV, especially with Renee Mary, because they were kind of the same height. And he was just always there. People loved him. He did his constituent work. He worked in Beverly. He worked at the hospital. So he was always around, and he was somebody you could lean on if you needed a vote. If you had a 4-4 vote and you needed that 5th vote for something to go through, Kevin would always have your back.
Yeah. So what kind of advice would you give to this new tribe that's taking over?
Take the job serious, but don't take yourself too serious.
I would have to say that Beverly's a special place. People who have grown up here, like myself, have chose to raise a family here. Paul, who has a business in Beverly, didn't grow up in Beverly, but he chose to stay here and grow his family. I think it's important not to forget that, and why Beverly is so special, and the traditions that we have, and the people that are here in Beverly who have been here for many years are here for a reason, because Beverly is a special place, and we want to make sure it becomes and stays a special place.
Where do you think the city's going now?
Where is the city going?
Yeah.
I think it's going again. I think it's going in the right direction, but I think it's very important that we keep, and Paul has done a great job with this too, keeping everything local. When we focus on the schools, the police, and fire, when we forget about the national politics and stop worrying about the R's and the D's like you had mentioned before, we're much more effective, and we've become a better unit doing that. I'm hoping that stays the course, because we're much more effective, because it's very easy to listen to outside people to want to influence you to kind of go in a different direction. We keep it local, we'll be better off.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful. We're at a point now is that in 1970 there were 40,000 people here. Right up until about 2003, 2004, there was still 40,000 people. All of a sudden we've made this jump, so we're up to about 46,000 people. And with all the housing that people are encouraging to come into the city, are we ready to be a city of 50,000? I don't think so. We have a high school that's crowded. We have a middle school that's really overcrowded. We built it for 1,300 kids, and now there's almost 1,500 people in here. We have to be really careful. We've always said, Beverly, like Tim said, Beverly's a special place. We're not Hamilton and Wenham, but then again, we're not Salem and Lynn. And do we want to be that urbanized as Salem and Lynn?
And I think it's important too that the character of the city is at stake, I guess you could say, because as we move forward, we need to do a good job planning. Maybe 40, 50 years ago, I don't think we did a great job planning the city. Beverly's a seaside community, so when we are building buildings, like when we built this high school that we're in right now, a lot of attention was brought to make it look like surrounding buildings, like kind of similar to what the Beverly Library looks like. When you're building buildings as a seaside community, maybe you don't have stucco buildings, you have clapboard and brick, so it kind of resembles a New England community. I think that's important. Other cities and towns do a great job with that. and I've always tried to, especially during the master plan, try to work with the group to do that and influence that. I hope that will continue and stay here.
Well, you get into the very interesting question of where the city's going. I've had this discussion with Westlake. What's the character of the
How come he
city?
comes up every time we're on Bev Camp? Somebody's got to bring up Westlake.
Well, he's like quite vocal, Jordan.
Yes, he is.
I can
And he's
bring
a
up
fri-
Jerry Gillespie too. He's another vocal one.
Yeah, and both good friends of ours.
Yeah, but I asked Wes one time, "What's the character of Beverly?" He said, "Change," and lots of things have changed over the years. And I think back to probably from my perspective, the biggest improvement in the city of Beverly was when Cummings brought out the old shoe,
Oh, of course.
and that really made a dramatic change in the character of city, going from essentially a manufacturing town, which Beverly always was, because you look at the south end of Rantoul Street,
Right.
and
Yep.
it's all the mills down there that were part of it, and now it's a different
Well, it's
kind of city.
it's a great tax base. It helps pay for things like
Oh, yeah.
schools and police stations, but it also you have employers down there employing people that live in the city of Beverly, which I think is very important,
Yeah.
especially during the situation with COVID that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
going through here. It's nice to, instead of traveling into Boston, you can have a good paying job and still live in the city of Beverly.
Yeah, it's amazing that you look back when Mayor Scanlon negotiated the TIF agreement, the tax increment financing agreement with Cummings, that people were against it. I don't say it was 50-50, but I think there were plenty of people that were against that because they felt like we were giving something away. So Cummings paid, I think, $162,000 for 10 years, and then they got a tax break for 5, and then they were paying full taxes for 10. And the windfall of cash that the city received, it's amazing what we've been able to do with that, and that's how we finance our projects like the police station, the middle school, and it's an economic engine that
Yeah,
we're so fortunate to have. And Cummings has gone and expanded in Beverly. They have 3 or 4 buildings up at Dunham Road now,
yeah. Well,
and it's good jobs.
I think that's one of the characters of the city that people don't recognize. It's a combination of living and working here. And I get concerned when we start talking about TOD, bringing in more people from outside, and the impact of that on the school system. Because sooner or later, they're going to have kids.
Right.
And as you point out, when you go to the state for looking for support for a new building, they set the size of the building, the number of seats you can have in it. And as you pointed out, the middle school is what, 3 years old, 5 years old now, something in that order, and it's already overcrowded. The high school is overcrowded. So very shortly, we're going to have to do it again.
Do something else.
Yeah,
I think
and,
the school committee really needs to think about eliminating school choice. The problem is you take somebody in as a kindergarten student, you have them all the way through.
Yeah,
You have to take care of the people that live here in Beverly before you bring others in from the outside.
yeah, it's,
Regardless of the financial impact. I know one thing that is attractive about school choice is you get money from the state.
Well, the schools receive money from the
Schools
state,
do, right.
yeah, but we're paying something out of the order of $14,000 a year to educate a kid. You don't get that much from the state.
No.
So
Right.
it's not a profit-making operation kind of thing. So, yeah, it's one of the things I think that needs to be worked on. What else do you think needs to be worked on?
Well, I've been squawking about second water meters for 20 years, and I've never had enough support. I've always had 2 or 3 people jump on the bandwagon with me. I think the fact that we residents are penalized for trying to keep their property up or washing the car in the driveway, whereas they're getting the sewer charge on water that's used outside.
Yeah,
I'm sure some of that water makes it down to the sewer and it gets used, but most of it ends up being absorbed in the ground.
Yeah.
And the sewer rate is the higher of the two, with the sewer and the water.
yeah,
There's got to be a formula to work it out. You really need the executive branch to buy into it, and the past couple of mayors haven't. I know Mike Collins, who is really the brain the brains of the city, as the director of engineering and director of DPW, he's not a big fan of it. But they do it in Danvers, they do it in Salem, they do it in Peabody. So there's no reason why it can't work here.
Well, that's what I got involved in that one time also. And what surprised me is we get a charge from the Salem Sewer Works based on just the size of the city of Beverly. And yet it sounds like they have no idea of how much sewage we're shipping across the river to them. And that just boggles my mind that that piece of information is missing. And if we had that piece of information, you could come up with a very simple formula to figure out what is the impact of a second sewer meter. And there's a lot of things we could solve, but what do you think we need to work on?
Well, I think a few things, nothing one in particular, but we rely a lot on new growth to pay for things besides the tax revenue that we have, like with the Cummings Center.
Yeah.
And new growth always pays for new buildings or new some things that we want to do in the city. And it's a balancing act. We just can't keep on growing and growing, and like Paul said, with new developments, because at some point, you can only build so much within the city of Beverly, and you just don't want to, again, go back to that change in the character of the community. But it's a challenge as a mayor, because you want to deliver the services that you delivered the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And trying to do that, and try to do it within the 2.5, levy limit is difficult. So you need to be creative and being able to be a little bit more efficient and do things differently. Like a few years ago, we consolidated the DPW from the schools in the city to try to run things more efficiently, so our buildings would last longer, so we're not building new buildings in 40, 50 years. They're lasting longer. I think that's been effective and more efficient, so I think there needs to be a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that was a significant problem that I remember, that the old high school, built in 1965, had a lot of serious problems with leakage and the heating system. And it was a maintenance issue, and that really led to its demise. And so consolidating all that, I think, is one of the major improvements that I've seen happen in the city. And you get into some of these issues of TOD, where the state is pushing us to expand around the train stations into some sort of concentrated, dense development. And Rantoul Street is already being criticized by lots of people as, that's too much. We don't want that character of the city. I guess, how do we get to the point of making a decision as to, like you started to say, where do we stop growing?
Right.
And decide that this is it. We got to make do with what we've got.
Right, and that's always going to be a balancing act for every city council and mayor doing that. I think you're always going to have some new growth, tearing down new buildings, building new ones, but major developments, just to get those developments so we could pay for something else. That's the tricky part, because you're right. You just can't keep on doing that over and over and over, because there's going to be a limit.
Well, there's a finite size to the city of Beverly, and the only place you can go is up.
Right.
And how tall a building do we want to go to?
Well, and I think that's going to change over the next few years. But when you talk about Hamilton Wenham, we're not Hamilton Wenham, nor are we Hamilton, or do we want to be. But then you also have cities to the south of us. We're I always say, from Pride's Crossing to Gloucester Crossing, we're a unique community, which is our strength, but it's also our weakness, because we're not a one community all thinking the same. So trying to be able to balance that, the pros and cons, and try to move the city forward can be a challenging.
A big thing that's going to happen after the first of the year is the mayor's going to come forward with the Bass River Overlay District. So that's a rezone that the council has to approve. And that Bolomat parcel, I know that somebody's interested in putting apartments there, somewhere in the neighborhood of 175. Now might be the time to sit back and say, hey, listen, do we really need this at that point right now? Are we ready to handle that? Your proponents of development will say yes, while you have a lot of people here in the city of Beverly, hopefully it's parents from the schools that say, hey, listen, we're bursting at the seams. Regardless, like you mentioned earlier, George, regardless, they're going to have kids eventually. Most people aren't, what do they call them? Double income, no kids.
Sinks.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that on an air. But, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
It definitely will be a challenge because you want to be able to take care of the people with the city of Beverly,
Yeah.
right? I know there's a housing crisis, but the city of Beverly can't solve that crisis by themselves. And I think that's a challenge for us as a city. But again, not only that, when we do, there's going to be something going down in the Bass River. Maybe not as much, but there's going to be something. So if you do build it, that's an entryway going into downtown. Make it look like it belongs in the city of Beverly.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know what, I've said this out loud before, I'm not a contemporary individual. I'm more of a traditionalist. I'm more like a seafaring community. That's what I like. I'm not a big believer in some of those buildings being downtown contemporary. And I think most of the people in the city of Beverly would agree with me. But if they want contemporary, maybe go back to Cambridge.
All right. Old school, number 33, Tim Flaherty. I mean, and believe me, we're not anti-development. We've championed events, projects like Anchor Point right up the road,
Yeah.
affordable housing for families. And then everybody was on board with the Briscoe community for living in the arts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be a dynamic project also. It's just about, you got to get to the point where how much can you handle?
Yeah.
And people are paying a lot of taxes. So you want to be able to deliver those services for the people, in this community that have either grown up here or chose to raise their family here.
Well, that gets to be the other issue too, that there's a lot of seniors besides me that want to downsize. And where do they go? They're forced out of town.
Right. They are actually, a few of my neighbors actually have retired, have actually gone down to Rantoul Street. And my concern is, not too far from retiring ourselves in about 10 years,
Yeah.
maybe sooner, who knows. But I also worry about my children. I have 4 children that I would love to have them, buy a house in the city of Beverly.
Yeah.
But it's, or in this general vicinity, it's difficult. It's a challenge.
Well, one of my favorite analogies is when I bought my house, 1967. I paid $32,000 for it, and if I go through the numbers of the cost of living CPI index, $1967 is now worth just about $8. So that says that $32,000 would be $250,000 right now. But if I believe Zillow, the house is worth something in the order of $900,000.
Oh, at least.
And so this is a advantage to people that live here, that's how much Beverly has improved economically for lots of reasons that you've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it makes it awful difficult. I know the other part of the analogy is back then you never bought a house that was more than 1 year's salary. And there aren't too many people making $900,000 a year.
Right.
So it gets to be a very difficult thing. And we've had this discussion before of how do you get people to live here and work here? And especially in the service industry, that they keep talking about a very vibrant downtown.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has an answer right now. It's really tough. If you're working, you're in the service industry and you're working your 40 or 45 hours a week, whether you're waiting tables or you're a cook, and salaries are real good nowadays because people can't find any employees. So if you find a good one, you hang on to them, and you're making yourself $60,000 or $70,000 a year. Even at that number, it's hard to find a place in Beverly. And if you look at the numbers, I was looking at the numbers to be able to live at Anchor Point, and it's if you're a family of 4 and you're making $90,000 a year, that's considered you qualify
Yeah.
to submit an application to get an apartment there. Remember when $90,000 was worth something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely a challenge.
So
You
So
can retire because you put your 4 kids through college already. I still got 2 on the way. Took me twice to get it right.
But this gets to be the character of the city, of how do we balance all this stuff? And I guess get back to the question of what do you suggest to the successors of yours? How are you going to balance this, and where do you put your priority?
I think, I like to say the city councils have all the answers, or the mayors, but I think it's even bigger than us. I think working with state and federal officials to kind of make Beverly, more affordable. But sometimes it's just like supply and demand. I know, like right now, you talk to any real estate agent and trying to find a good apartment in Beverly. People are really wanting to come to Beverly, and that's kind of supply and demand. Is not, like they say, you need more housing. And people want to live in Beverly, and there's not a lot of it. Not only apartments-wise, but also when you're trying to sell a house today, even before it goes on the market, you have people knocking on your door.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, but it's not just Beverly. People say, oh, well, Beverly. If you go to other surrounding communities like Danvers or Peabody, other areas, the housing market's tough right now.
Yeah, the North Shore is a very attractive place to live.
Right.
There's a lot of facilities and advantages to living around here, and it's going to attract people, and that's just going to drive up the cost of everything.
Right.
And it's a tough act.
Yeah.
So I guess we get down to the point of we've had our half hour of fun, and in the few minutes we got left, any words of wisdom you'd like to pass on
Words of wisdom to who? The city or our
to whoever needs it?
No, I just think people really need to know that your elected officials are working on your behalf. We've been fortunate Tim and I, to work together mostly. I think he was on for 6 terms when I wasn't there, 2 before, and then 4, I don't know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But we've worked pretty close. And between the 2 of us, I think we can say that we probably work with 95% of really good people that care about the city. And ask people to reach out with ideas. Call your city council, call your mayor. Another big thing about our residents is get involved, be on boards and commissions, because I know people get busy and a lot of people work second jobs, but we need new faces on city boards and commissions.
Not only that, but even school committee members or city councilors, to get involved, to run for office, it does make a difference. You need good people to make a good city.
Yep.
And keep it nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and we appreciate your service over the years, and thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your
George.
wisdom.
Thank you,
And,
Judge.
ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening, and we'll be talking to you later.